Well, look, for me, one of the most important aspects of any club is the youth and development of the organisation. And I think the guys in our academy are doing a terrific job. We see another very exciting young player coming through the system. Let's make no mistake, there's still a lot of work to do. You know, Isaiah has done a fabulous job to put himself in this position. The club have recognised that. If you look at the pipeline and the process that any young players go through, we have that process in place. There'll be a lot more football and exposure for Isaiah and for Adem, who are our two homegrown players, down in Huntsville. And they take that next step in their careers. And the hope is that we, of course, see him in the first team at some point. But, you know, there's some work to do. But the potential is definitely there.
Thank you, Coach. And now onto the game. Tell us what you saw today from the team.
Yeah, a very, very competitive game from a well-organised Birmingham side. Great for us to be back in the stadium and on our own field. Very different perspective to what we've seen in some of the pre-season games so far. Just the dynamic of being in our stadium changes some of the things that go on. Some really nice possession and some great opportunities created. Certainly a step in the right direction with the ball. Some good pressure. Tad concerned about the 2 goals conceded, but that does happen sometimes in pre-season. There are mistakes made, and if they're going to be mistakes made, it's a good time to make them. But all in all, 1 or 2 areas of our game that slowly but surely I think we're starting to warm to and produce some, some aspects and angles that hopefully in the future will give us an opportunity to create chances and goal-scoring moments.
All right, we're going to open the floor for questions. Ben?
Yeah, Gary, it looked like the maybe the defensive and midfield lines were pushed a bit higher than we've seen before, and it looked like you guys were pressing a bit more. Do you think, first of all, is that an accurate assessment, and is that something that you guys have been working on so far in preseason?
Yeah, look, I make no bones about it. The first half of last year, here especially, we were in good form. We produced some terrific results, and part of that was a more progressive, energetic and intense approach to the game. Now, depending on the way the game unfolds, can sometimes be dependent on how long that lasts for. But certainly to try and reproduce some of that form and get back to that sort of mindset, more importantly. So today was another good chance to try at home against a team that, we would have expected to maybe dominate with the ball. And for the first half, in the first, 75 minutes of the game, I thought we did. But yes, that's certainly an angle that we have to improve upon. There are some dynamics of their game with a back three that make life and some of those decisions a little bit more difficult for the players. So it's good to see. But I thought all in all, there was a really positive attitude to the work. And at this stage of the pre-season, that's important.
Gary, it looked like Drew Yearwood playing very high up next to Sam for quite some stretches today. Is that a way that you see him affecting games this season? What did you like from him today? Yeah, I mean, I've been really pleased and excited with what I'm seeing out of Drew since he's come in from the Red Bull. Very talented, very intelligent. He has got a turn of pace, but he's also competitive. We saw Hanny get 60 minutes for the first time this pre-season, which was great news. But without someone like Randall, that void, if you like, to fill becomes a tad more difficult. It was a natural swap when he was fit and available. So yeah, more importantly, just to see him there. What was it going to look like? How did he interact with the centre forward? Were we going to see a little bit more of an industrious midfield?
Could he create some chances? I thought we saw all of that, and if I'm not mistaken, he missed an open goal as well. So more importantly, he's getting himself into some good areas. So, pleased with what I saw, and possibly down the line something that we could maybe look at.
Yeah, Gary, this game against Birmingham and next week's game against Memphis, two USL clubs that you might imagine would try to maybe sit back a little bit more, defend against against you guys. Did you look at this game and are you going to look at Memphis coming in as maybe a chance to see how you do in possession and kind of improve and kind of see what improvements if any need to be made playing with the ball?
Well, more importantly, I'm looking at what the Dominican game might look like, and it's very difficult to replicate, of course. We're trying to get through minutes with the players, we're trying to improve their fitness and get them ready for what's going to be a very difficult opening 3 or 4 weeks of the season. But if I look at what maybe the Dominican game could represent, be ultra competitive. I'm imagining that they're going to be, really up for the game. It's going to be look, it's important for both of us, but it's a cup final. They'll be inspired by what they can achieve or might move on to. So I'm wondering if the two games might be fairly similar. You get a side that are trying to raise their game in Birmingham and did a very, very good job, by the way. A tough group to break down, which I'm imagining the team we're going to play against in the Dominican will be. Unfortunately, I can't replicate the turf field, but in many ways, I want the guys to see some of those dynamics. Uncompromising players that they've not run into before, situations that they're going to have to adapt to, which they've had to today. How do you come out on top? That's ultimately what we're going to run into when the season starts.
Gary McKenzie has appeared to provide you a bit of a spark off the bench, and just with his pace in particular, just how big of a luxury is it to have someone of that level of athleticism and pace coming on specifically, and just the way it lends itself to be a substitution for you?
He's more comfortable on the right-hand side, of course. He's played a lot of his football there. But I was looking at Josh Bauer at left-back as a possible replacement, even for small periods, given the omission of Daniel Lovitz at the moment. So I wanted a more natural winger out on this side, just to have a look at what that might look like. And I think we've seen on multiple occasions now in pre-season, Mackenzie's ability to almost sort of, drift past people in the most effortless of ways with his turn of pace. It just left him a little bit lopsided on this side because he wants to keep coming on his right foot. But, very good addition, great dynamic to have in the group, and I'm sure he will continue to improve as he settles into the surroundings that his new home.
Gary, being this the kind of a preseason that it is, because you already have a game coming up for points, do you have any concerns in terms of how the team is at this point tactically, which maybe in previous seasons you didn't even worry about it yet? Obviously, some of the players are at different levels as well. Any concerns about all those issues?
About a team tactically playing in a different way, or us? No, not really. As I look at some of the things that we're going to have to achieve as we go into the early stages of this new season, the one thing it won't be is straightforward. The travel, the midweek games, the east to west. But the other thing we do know, we've run into two teams now that play with a back three. Toronto, the last game out, and obviously today. And it asks a different question, a new question of the group. How do we assert ourselves with the ball? How are we going to break those sort of teams down? What does it look like when we defend? How are we going to get that pressure on? Honestly, on Friday, before we left Florida. The Toronto team for the first period, you know, they found gaps in our group and they were able to find opportunities just through maybe a lack of cohesion in our group as we're working through one or two new sort of thoughts and mindsets that we want to try and implement. And I thought tonight was far more professional. It was tighter. There was no lack of energy to go and press the ball, but the recovery to tighten up those lines and then go again and look more organised. You see that in pre-season, slowly but surely. Some of those pictures look more like you saw at the end of last year than maybe in the early part of pre-season where, you know, the guys are just trying to find their sea legs, as it were. You know, they're getting around the field again and putting themselves in a much better physical position. So I don't have any problems. You know, the opening two fixtures of our season in the Dominican and then back here against New York, could they be any more different? You know, New York are never easy to play against, and we're going to go to the Dominican in an environment and against a team we know very little about. So there's going to be some adaptation, and the players have certainly got to think on their feet while they're out there as well.
We will have one final question from Ben here in the room, and then we'll transition to Valer Shavila, who's on the Zoom.
Yeah, Gary, you mentioned Randall in reference to Drew, and I'm just curious, you talked about him coming back. Have you heard more about his injury, and how long is he expected to miss?
Yeah, he has a hamstring problem at the moment, you know, probably anywhere between a month and 6 weeks, so fairly substantial. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a process that the player has to work through. He's seen before, he understands the recovery that's needed and the way he needs to conduct himself in that period of inactivity, and we have to adapt. All teams do. It's just disappointing having seen him back in the group and then going away again and coming back injured. So, yeah.
Valer, take us on.
Hey Gary, with the Randall, what you just said about Randall, and obviously Walker Zimmerman and Dan Lovitz having a slower start maybe or taking a little bit longer, same thing with Hani. Is it too late at this point to add anyone to the squad who would contribute significant minutes, or is that something you're still considering?
I would have to say, without having the roster in front of me, that we don't actually have a slot to bring anyone in full stop. So somebody would have to move, first of all. On top of that, you know, you'd have to talk to Mike about this financially, but I think we're in a position, I may have said before, where we need or would need to move someone out to get someone in to create that cap space. I don't think you ever say that it won't happen, but maybe the thing to just add to that is, I don't think Daniel's a million miles away. I would expect to see him in the group on Friday, working competitively. Yes, he's behind the rest of the group, but he's been able to do a lot of physical work. So he's not going to be lacking in fitness. It'll just be, of course, match sharpness and play that he's missed out on. Walker's not a million miles away as well. Whilst it might be a push to see him in the Memphis game, we may actually see some minutes there. Even if we don't, there's certainly some thoughts in my mind to get him some behind closed doors competitive work so that he's not far away from the Dominican start and then into New York. So it's always difficult to miss those players. In terms of adding, it's a little bit more complicated than it sounds.